From jealousy to forgiveness, a story of family, dreams, and God's plan. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Joseph. He had many brothers, but they didn't like him very much. Joseph's father, Jacob, loved him the most and gave him a beautiful coat with many colors. Joseph's brothers were very jealous, and they didn't like that Joseph was their father's favorite. One day, the brothers became so angry that they took Joseph's coat and threw him into a pit. They thought they would never see him again. But then, they had an idea to sell Joseph to some travelers. The travelers took Joseph far away to a place called Egypt. Even though Joseph was far from home, he never gave up. He worked hard and trusted God. One day, Joseph became a very important man in Egypt. And when his brothers needed food during a famine, they came to Egypt. They didn't recognize Joseph at first, but Joseph forgave them and helped them. Joseph showed that even when things are tough, God can turn everything into something good. He forgave his brothers and they all lived happily together again. Moral of the story, even when others are unkind, we should forgive and trust that God has a plan for us.
Esther, a queen who saved her people with courage and faith. Once upon a time, there was a brave young woman named Esther. She was a Jewish girl who became queen in the land of Persia. The king, King Xerxes, chose Esther because she was kind, beautiful, and wise. But there was a man named Haman, who didn't like Esther's people, the Jews. He made a terrible plan to harm them. Esther's cousin, Mordecai, heard about the plan and asked Esther to help. She was scared because speaking to the king without being invited could get her in trouble, but Mordecai told her, "Perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this." Esther was very brave and decided to speak up. She went to the king and told him Haman's evil plan. The king was very angry, and he stopped Haman. Esther saved her people, and everyone rejoiced. Moral of the story, Esther teaches us to be brave and speak up for what's right, even when it's hard. A brave boy, a giant challenge, and the power of faith. A long time ago, there was a young shepherd boy named David. One day, the mighty Philistine giant, Goliath, challenged the Israelite army. Goliath was huge and strong, and everyone was scared of him. He mocked God's people and said, "Send someone to fight me." But David, who was just a boy, wasn't afraid. He believed in God's power. David told King Saul, "I will fight Goliath. God has helped me protect my sheep from lions and bears, and he will help me defeat Goliath too." With just a sling and 5 smooth stones, David went to face the giant. Goliath laughed at David, but David was brave. He took a stone, slung it, and with God's help, the stone hit Goliath right in the forehead. The giant fell down, and David won the battle. Moral of the story, David teaches us that with God on our side, we can face any challenge, no matter how big it seems.
Trusting God's promise and the adventure of the Great Flood. A long time ago, the world was filled with people who didn't listen to God. But Noah was a good man who loved God and obeyed him. One day, God spoke to Noah and told him to build a huge ark because he was going to send a great flood to cleanse the earth. God told Noah to bring 2 of every kind of animal, 1 male and 1 female, onto the ark to keep them safe. Noah worked very hard, and after many years, the ark was ready. The animals came 2 by 2, and Noah and his family boarded the ark. Then, it started to rain. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and the water covered the earth. But Noah, his family, and the animals were safe inside the ark. When the rain stopped, Noah sent out a dove to see if the water had gone down. The dove came back with an olive leaf, which meant the earth was becoming dry again. After a long time, God told Noah it was safe to leave the ark, and he made a beautiful rainbow in the sky as a promise that he would never flood the earth again. Moral of the story, Noah teaches us to trust God, even when we don't understand his plan, and that he keeps his promises.
A brave leader who trusted God to set his people free. A long time ago, there was a baby named Moses. He was born to a family of slaves in Egypt, where the Pharaoh was very cruel to the people of Israel. When Moses was just a baby, his mother put him in a basket and placed him in the river, hoping to save him from the Pharaoh's orders to hurt all baby boys. Moses' basket floated to the Pharaoh's palace, where his daughter found him and decided to raise him as her own. Moses grew up in the palace, but he never forgot his people. One day, he saw how the Egyptians were treating the Israelites, and he became angry. He ran away to the desert, where God spoke to him through a burning bush. God told Moses, "Go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let my people go." Moses was scared, but God promised to be with him. Moses returned to Egypt and, with God's help, he performed miracles, like parting the Red Sea, and led the Israelites to freedom. Moral of the story: Moses teaches us that no matter how scared we are, God will always help us when we trust in Him.
A story of unshakable faith and God's protection. A long time ago, there was a young man named Daniel who lived in a land called Babylon. Daniel loved God very much, and he always prayed and obeyed him, even though he was far from home. King Darius made Daniel one of his leaders because Daniel was wise and trustworthy. But some people didn't like Daniel, so they tricked King Darius into making a law that said no one could pray to anyone except the king. Daniel knew this was wrong, but he continued to pray to God every day, just as he always had. The men who tricked King Darius caught Daniel praying and told the king. King Darius was very sad because he liked Daniel, but the law said Daniel had to be thrown into a den of lions. Daniel wasn't afraid because he trusted God to protect him. The next morning, King Darius rushed to the lion's den and called out, "Daniel, has your God saved you?" And Daniel answered, "Yes. God sent an angel to close the mouths of the lions." Daniel was safe, and the king was overjoyed. Daniel's faith in God had saved him. Moral of the story: Daniel teaches us to trust God, even when we face scary situations, because God is always with us.
A story of faith, hope, and God's amazing answer. A long time ago, there was a woman named Hannah who was very sad because she didn't have any children. She prayed to God with all her heart, asking Him for a child. Hannah promised that if God gave her a son, she would dedicate him to the Lord's service for his whole life. God heard Hannah's prayer and gave her a baby boy, whom she named Samuel. Hannah was overjoyed and kept her promise. When Samuel was old enough, she took him to the temple to live with the priest, Eli, so he could serve God. Hannah was filled with joy and gratitude. She praised God for answering her prayer, and every year she made a special coat for Samuel and visited him. Samuel grew up to be a great prophet and leader of Israel, and God blessed Hannah with more children. Moral of the story: Hannah teaches us that God hears our prayers, and when we trust Him, He answers in His perfect way.